Hello, welcome to the Tolkien Collector's Guide YouTube channel, where we gather experts from around the world to discuss Tolkien's books and the people who read them. I'm Urulókë, and with me are Trotter and Mr. Underhill. We're going to be talking about Barbara Remington, one of the artists who worked on The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit book covers for the American paperbacks that came out in the 60s. So welcome to the Tolkien Collector's Guide YouTube channel. We're going to dive right in. In the 1960s, there was a great demand for paperback books in America. The universities were students were consuming books in large numbers, and a topic we'll spend some time on in another video is talking about the Ace books of The Lord of the Rings. But because of what Ace was doing, the Tolkien and his publisher needed to have official paperback editions made in the United States, and they needed to have them done quite quickly in order to get them out to market before they lost market share or potentially even the copyright for the books. And so a deal was made with Ballantine Books, which is a very popular American fantasy paperback publisher in the United States. So Ballantine in 1965 very quickly put out a Hobbit paperback. In a matter of weeks, really, they pulled this together, and they hired Barbara Remington, an artist who did a lot of work for Betty Ballantine and for the Ballantine books. She was sort of a contract artist that they had on board, and she was given instructions to make a cover for The Hobbit. She essentially had, on the order of hours or maybe a day or two, she had not read the book. She couldn't get a copy of the book. And so Betty Ballantine gave her direction on what should be on the cover. I don't know if you haven't seen the cover before. We'll show it to you now. It has a very interesting looking tree with these pink bulbous things hanging off of it. It has emus. The very first edition or first version of the art that Barbara did had a lion added in the lower left corner on specific instruction from Betty Ballantine. It was she wanted to have an animal on there. So of course Barbara Remington does exactly what was requested. She makes this cover art. The book is published, and then in the meantime they start working on The Lord of the Rings as well. So she had very similar instruction on going and painting cover art for this fantasy series very quickly. Again, no time to read the books. They were very hard to get at that time because they were hardcover only and not something that Barbara Remington had access to. And so again, she talked with friends to get a general idea of what this book was about. And she painted what's now called her triptych, which is a very wide single piece of art that was then cut into thirds for the covers of the three books. You can see this entire piece of work if you put the three book covers together, but they also did a poster of it that's very large and oversized and very collectible at this point. But again, it has some very vague connection to Tolkien and his books itself, because it was sort of a telephone game of description of what the content was going in. So that's how she made the art. Tolkien was sent a copy of The Hobbit in 1965, and he had a very powerful negative reaction to it. I think it's letters 277 in the letters of J.R. Tolkien. He sent a response to Ballantine, which was not recorded, but he then talked about that. He summarized what he sent in a letter to Rainer Unwin, which is letters 277. And I'm going to read just a small little paragraph off of this, but Tolkien says, "I think the cover ugly. I recognize that a main object of paperback cover is to attract purchasers, and I suppose that you are better judges of what is attractive in the USA than I am. I therefore will not enter into a debate about taste," meaning, though I did not say so, horrible colors and foul lettering. "But I must ask this about the vignette. What has it got to do with the story?" where is this place? Why a lion and emus? And what is that thing in the foreground with pink bulbs? I do not understand how anybody who has read the tale, I hope you are one, could think such a picture would please the author. So fantastic little
Tolkien went scorched earth on that one.
He did. And so Betty called him up, and this is documented in, I have an article on the Tolkien Guide with where we know all this from, but Betty Ballantyne calls up Tolkien to talk to him about it, and she's very defensive.
Probably in the middle of the night.
She absolutely thought the cover was perfect. It was her design. She had instructed the artist on what to do. She said that the bulbous pink thing was supposed to be a Christmas tree. It was meant to make people think of Christmas. My personal theory is that she was really going for like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because she kept talking about it needs a lion, it needs a Christmas tree, it needs these other animals. So I think even Betty Ballantyne was a bit confused as to what The Hobbit was really about.
There's no emus though with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are there? So
no,
can't entirely.
But you know, if you tell an artist, just put animals around, who knows what you're going to get.
And Betty Ballantyne really had no excuse as to be confused, because The Hobbit had been out for so many years at that point. She had read it.
She had read it.
I'm sure she had read it. She just didn't care. She wanted people to buy the book based on the cover. So that's how the covers came about. Tolkien insisted that the lion at least be removed, and so after the 5th impression of the paperback, his revised text was delivered, because he was madly revising The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings into second, or in Hobbit's case, 3rd edition text, in order to retain copyright in the U.S. So when the 3rd edition text for The Hobbit was delivered, Ballantyne on the 6th impression and forward airbrushed or hand brushed the lion off of the cover for those paperbacks. So it only appears on the first 5 impressions. And also in this time frame, Barbara Remington read the books. She absolutely loved them. There's an interview on Tolkien Guide. I'll put a link that she did. It wasn't with us, but we have permission to reproduce the interview. And she talks about how she loved the stories, both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. They were fantastic, and she would have refused to have illustrated the covers had she read them. She thought the books were too well written and too important for her mediocre. She didn't call it mediocre skills, but she felt she wasn't worthy to illustrate the covers of these books. So it's an interesting response. She wrote an apology letter to Tolkien. She actually sent him a literal olive branch with a letter as a peace offering to explain what had happened to him. She did continue to make art based on The Lord of the Rings herself for her own private collection. Sadly, most of that I think it's never been published. So there's very little record of it. She did do some exhibitions in New York City around where she was living at the time, and I'm sure the art is still out there in a private collection somewhere. But
somebody's got it.
Somebody's got it. So to me, it's a fascinating story of the history of publishing deadlines and how an artist came to the story on one side of it and then flipped to the other. And I really like these books that have this artwork on them. They are sort of a memory of childhood to me, because they were kind of around in the 70s still when I was picking up paperbacks. They have nothing to do with the books in my mind, but they're a fond, a small part of my collection, if you will, as far as the book covers go.
I think they're quite iconic covers. It was a bit like the original Tolkien's cover for the Hobbit's iconic. Obviously, I think the Barbara Remington one is. If you look at that book, a lot of people are going to know instantly just from that cover what the book is, because it's been around for so long, and it is a really it's a good illustration, but you're right, it has absolutely nothing to do with the book. But, well, there is a hobbit hole in there, sort of, isn't there? I think
there is.
Yeah,
so there is a little bit to do with the book, a tiny bit.
There's a hint of a hill with some holes, in it with doors on them, etc. So clearly somebody was describing to her, kind of what it should look like. But yeah, outside of those paperbacks, which are collectible, people do look for them. I think the Hobbit with the lion on it is probably the most sought after of her art. They're not hard to find. Both the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings with her artwork on them. There were just so many published. I mean, I think according to Hammond's bibliography, the Hobbit paperback, the first 5 impressions was like 125,000 copies were printed. So there's a lot of them out there. I don't know individual impressions, but there's overall that was the count. So and then smaller numbers, I think it was 50,000 or so each. No, it was over 100,000 for the Lord of the Rings as well. So just large numbers of these books. They're easy to find. You don't have to pay, an arm and a leg for them. They're fun to collect. But also her art was popular at the time. I mean, these books sold well. People did like them. They ended up making posters. So you could buy what's called the triptych poster, which is without any text. It's just her painting of the Lord of the Rings, that full scene. It's a great poster. It's so large, and so many copies were destroyed by masking tape and pinholes hanging them. It was such a heavy poster. They all have ripped corners at this point, but they're still out there. They are kind of expensive, but they're beautiful posters if you like her art. A piece that's based on her Hobbit art without the lion is available as a poster that says "Come to Middle Earth" across the bottom of it. I have a copy of that poster. It is definitely going up in price in these crazy days we currently live in, but that's the second poster. And then she made a map print for a poster. So that's the only place I'm aware of that you can get this map is as a poster. And it's got a lot of similar, she put, I think they're called salamanders by many fans, these little crazy little animals sprinkled around on it. It's definitely her style. She liked putting those little details in there. But the map is a great thing to keep an eye out for. It's another piece.
There's some quite interesting box sets as well, isn't there, for these?
That's
slightly different colours and
one of the things
colours.
One of the things that's fun to collect, besides just her books, is Ballantine boxed the Lord of the Rings together. The early box sets are just the Lord of the Rings. Later they did a box set with the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit together. But I think that was after they took Barbara Remington's artwork off of the paperbacks when they started doing, because in the early 1970s they switched Barbara Remington's art off of the covers, Ballantine did, and they replaced it with Tolkien's artwork.
Yes.
What was that? I think it was like 72, 73 is when they did that, because there are a couple of different variants of the box set. There's a green box, which is the earliest one, which is, I think, the one that's the most sought after, the one that's hardest to come by, because I think there were only maybe 2 or 3 print runs of that one. And then there is a white box with Barbara Remington's art on the box. Actually, Ballantine got smart after the first couple printings, and they started to put the artwork on the box. But it's still only it's like a black and white box. And then I think the one that Andrew was referencing is there's a red and blue one, which I think is the easiest one to find, and that's the third sort of variant of the box, and that's got some later printings of Barbara Remington's artwork on there. And it doesn't have, those boxes don't have the Hobbit included. It's just the Lord of the Rings. Where you put the 3 paperback books together and it makes the triptych when you put them together. I love Barbara Remington's artwork. I'll just put that out there. It's an early Tolkien printing if it's illustrated by either Barbara Remington, Pauline Baynes, or Tolkien. I mean, that's how you know it's an early sort of like, Tolkien publication. It's one of those 3. So, and I've said in a previous video that the Barbara Remington Hobbit was the first Tolkien book I ever owned as a small boy. I still have it. It's all beat up. It's a fifth print, Jeremy. It's not a first print. It's a fifth. I do have a first print now, but the one I got originally was a fifth print. Another way that you can tell the difference between the earlier Hobbits and the later Hobbits, if you're just looking at the spine, the word the Hobbit the color of the Hobbit is different. The color of the word Hobbit on the spine, the colors change as you move forward in time. The later printings, the Hobbit, I think it's a slightly different shade of blue. So that's another way that you can sort of like tell the difference without actually seeing the cover. I mean, from the obvious, not having the line on there. So yeah, I love Barbara Remington's art. I was telling the guys off camera, I don't have any of the posters, and I think I missed the boat on them now because they're all a little too much. But hopefully, I'm hoping to grab a Come to Middle Earth poster at some point because I do. I love Barbara Remington's art. It's great. It's psychedelic. It's prehistoric in a lot of ways.
It's of its time period, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
of its time.
In the 1960s there was a lot of avant-garde abstract art being produced, and I think Barbara Remington's art goes right in with that kind of stuff. It's great. It's really good stuff. Regardless of what Tolkien said.
That's right.
I don't care what Tolkien said. I like it.
Yeah, if you like the triptych and you don't want to spend big bucks on the poster, there's also a puzzle that reproduces the same art. It's from International Polygonics, I think was the name of the company. Anyway, I'll put up some pictures here. You can see in the video, it's the same artwork, so no text on it. It's just her picture. It's pretty much frameable in quality of the print. If you put the puzzle together and want to go that route, it's a much less expensive way to get her art if you're interested in that. So I recommend that as well.